By now, we've mentioned a few times that you will need to pause at different intervals to create and review your markers during reading. Unlike when we're in a conversation or listening to a lecture, we should not create markers while we're reading simultaneously. This shouldn't come as a surprise, given that our visual processing is focused on making sense of the written symbols on the text. However, there has been a lot of confusion in the past as to how exactly we can integrate this habit into speed reading. Furthermore, since we've just finished telling you that in the short term you should focus on speed over comprehension, it's probably a good idea to explain how you'll use marker pauses in the long term to make sure that your attention is restored once you're able to get comprehension up to speed. So, how do we apply the concept of markers to speed reading given the rapid pace? Won't these pauses just slow us down to normal reading speeds on average? No way. First of all, we usually end up with only 1 or 2 markers per paragraph, even if those markers each have some nested details. With time, you may notice that markers automatically pop into your head as your eyes are moving from one paragraph to the next. Either way, we pause for a second or so after each paragraph to try to remember what we've read. That's usually enough time to create markers and even to link them up. The general ideas of the paragraph make the markers. In the beginning, while we're still practicing, we start with very simple markers that are not very lively and have limited detail. Then we try to remember everything in the paragraph that adds up information to the main idea and visualize it as a detail of the marker. One technique that Lev likes to use is assigning an emotional color to the paragraph as a marker. Red can represent anger, for example, and blue can represent calm or resolution. Those are the types of simple markers we make in the beginning. The markers should eventually start to become more and more detailed with practice. Like I mentioned earlier, with time, you'll become faster and faster at creating the markers, and it will become second nature. At that point, your brain will most likely create markers on the fly as you read, or at the very least, it will become second nature to assign markers when you reach the end of a paragraph. But this takes a lot of time and a lot of practice, and even when it happens, you still should make a conscious effort to review your markers. So for now, it's okay to take even a few seconds after each paragraph to create and link your markers. You're still reading much faster and with more attention than you would if you were sub-vocalizing. Sometimes it makes sense to sub-vocalize your markers only, like important phrases and names and things like that. This way, you'll enjoy the benefits of dual coding while retaining a high reading speed. Remember what we learned in the previous section. When you pre-read several paragraphs in a section, your brain has some time to come up with possible markers before you actually need to use them. Although this may sound counterintuitive, pre-reading speeds up marker generation and makes basic markers available for detail collection. Occasionally, you may feel that you cannot finish a paragraph because you vocalize a word and your attention drifts off. This means that you need to stop and review your markers because you're overloading your short-term memory. This may happen every few pages, or it may only happen in between chapters, but taking pauses and looking up not only gives your brain a chance to clear out your short-term memory and review your markers, it's also a great way to prevent eye strain. So make sure to look at something far away and do so when you make longer pauses. That's a good segue into discussing more macro-level marker review. Just like a text is broken up into paragraphs and then chapters and then sections and finally the entire volume, so too should be your marker review. Whereas you'll spend only around a second reviewing markers from within a paragraph, almost automatically, you should look up and recall those markers for 2 to 3 seconds in between pages, or at least every few pages, to make sure that you're connecting it all together going forward. Beyond that, you should always take a long pause between chapters and look up from your book for as long as 15 to 30 seconds, depending on the density and length, and review all the markers you created and how they tie together. This is a crucial step in tricking the hippocampi into thinking the information is relevant. After all, you just learned it and you've already reviewed it 3 times and connected it to a dozen other new concepts. It must be something really important, right? The next step probably doesn't surprise you at all. When you finish a book in its entirety, it's a good idea to flip through it quickly or look at the table of contents and try to recall as many of the markers as possible. If you utilize some of the highlighting or note-taking tips we'll be teaching in the coming lectures, it's a great idea to flip through your highlights or notes and try to vividly imagine the visual or sensory markers you created for each highlighted point. In fact, doing this every few months is a great idea if you wish to maintain a high retention of the material. Personally, I like to spend an hour every now and again when I'm in between books, flipping through a few of my favorite books of all time, reviewing my highlights, and thinking about the markers that represent them. Doing all of this will dramatically improve your long-term memory of the information and ensure that despite your speed, you are not sacrificing the quality of comprehension. So, to review, make small pauses of around 1 second in between paragraphs, make medium pauses of 2 to 3 seconds between pages, make larger pauses of 15 to 30 seconds between chapters, and add in any additional pauses anytime you feel distracted, overwhelmed, or frustrated and need to review. Now, don't neglect this step, or you'll be just like every other speed reader out there who can read at blazing speeds and remember nothing of what they've read even an hour later.